Hand cannons got a massive buff this season with the mid-season patch, and I already covered how OP something like SUNSHOT became, allowing you to constantly 2-tap enemies and even have the explosions kill while under power. So in this video, I want to take the time to go over 3 unique builds, all of which allow you to maintain restoration infinitely with SUNSHOT. Hopping straight into a sort of first look for each of the builds, each of these are going to play slightly differently, but give off the same healing effect. The goal here was always to have infinite restoration, whether that be ×1 or ×2. Naturally, some of the builds are going to be better for movement, others offer better healing and ad clear, and we even have a full support type build, which is going to be great for supplying others who aren't on solar with survivability and even buffing their abilities too. All you're going to need for these 3 builds are going to be SUNSHOT as your main primary weapon, sunbracers for 2 of the builds, and then verity's brow for the 3rd and final build. I used variations of each of the sunbracers builds in speedruns for Root of Nightmares, and even the verity's build for day 1 Kingsfall. So no matter where you bring these builds, they're going to hold up. Looking over build number 1, this is going to be a sunbracers build which offers restoration ×1 and is overall better for movement. We don't have heat rises, as you're going to see, and I know a lot of people love heat rises, but a ton of people can't really stand the slow movement with it, including myself, which is why there are multiple versions in this video. This build is best used in raid settings. It's centered around building your melee from nothing, just through orbs of power and grenade damage. So you don't need the perfect setting for this build to work. It's made so that even when your melee doesn't kill or somebody takes your kills, you can hop straight back into the sunbracer cycle with very little downtime, and you don't need to force yourself to only rely on sunbracers either. Use it when you want, and then keep it as a pocket option when you don't want it. For weapons, all you're really going to need is SUNSHOT. Anything in the kinetic or heavy slot is completely up to you. And then for the first variant of the build, we're going to be rolling with sunbracers as our exotic armor piece. For your melee, Incinerator Snap is just better overall for proccing sunbracers, especially while under power. You're going to want solar grenades because these obviously synergize with sunbracers and are one of the best grenades in the entire game for consistent ad clear. Touch of Flame is going to buff our solar grenades. This is at base going to increase their linger duration, so that's more damage over time, better ad clear, plus they're also just getting more raw damage from the blobs of lava that they're also going to start emitting. For our fragments, Ember of Empyrean extends our restoration effect anytime that we get an ability final blow or a solar weapon final blow. So as long as we have grenades out on the field and we're just using sunbracers for any other kill, we're extending our radiant and restoration effects. Ember of Ashes is really just buffing our melee here, allowing us to get kills more consistently because we're proccing ignitions. Ember of Mercy is what gives us restoration anytime we pick up a fire sprite, plus some additional ability back. And then finally, Ember of Searing is what actually allows our scorched target defeats to create fire sprites, which will happen again through our grenade kills and even through SUNSHOT kills too. If you guys want, you can take a screenshot and apply the mods yourself or as you follow along, or you just copy the dim link in the description down below for build number 1. On our helmet, most notably, we get increased energy back for our super through grenade kills with Ashes to Assets, and then I also have on Solar Siphon to generate orbs of power through our SUNSHOT final blows. On our gauntlets, make sure you are obviously running sunbracers once again. Make sure you have fastball on just to throw your solar grenades further. I like momentum transfer because we aren't using heat rises, so this allows our grenade damage to constantly regen our melee ability. And I do have firepower on to create orbs on grenade final blows, but firepower is currently bugged, so if you don't see any orbs being gened through your grenade right now, that's because it's not properly working, but I do still recommend having it on the build. On our boots, we have on Invigoration. Anytime we pick up an orb of power, we get a small percentage of our melee energy refunded, which is great for maintaining our melee ability to proc sunbracers. And then we do also have Recuperation, which I think is around 70 HP, granted straight back each and every orb that you pick up. If you gen enough orbs, it shouldn't be needed, but on our class item, we do have Outreach, so that anytime we need a small percentage of our melee back to reproc sunbracers, if we have any downtime for whatever reason, we do have Outreach. Build number 2 is obviously for those who love heat rises and want some better healing. This is going to give us restoration ×2, and in this background gameplay, I was able to keep the ×2 healing up for 8 minutes straight, pretty casually too. So when I say this is the best infinite healing the game has to offer, I think it's pretty hard to argue with that. Overall, in a solo setting, this build is best, but it still works great for ad clear rolls in raids and dungeons. I just say it works best for solo play because you really don't want to have other players messing up your cycle because you're relying on it to get all your abilities back constantly. For underpower content, this is one of the strongest builds in the entire game. You're pretty much invincible unless you get one shot. In this setup, things are going to be slightly different for a better cycle, and once again, restoration ×2 overall. Make sure you're running Phoenix Dive. With this, anytime Heat Rise is active, we can dive to the ground and proc restoration ×2 for a few seconds, which will also scorch some targets in the process. Once again, just like most sunbracers builds, you do want Incinerator Snap on. You're also going to want Solar Grenades for the same reason. And then once again, for better ad clear, damage, duration, you want Touch of Flame on. New to this second version of the build that we're going over, we have the aspect Heat Rises. With this, we can consume one of our grenades to activate Heat Rises, where we can then stay in the air and fight from up there. And then with that, anytime we are airborne, with or without Heat Rises actually being active, we're going to be granted melee energy back per kill that we get. Also, do keep in mind, this is why we're running Phoenix Dive, because when this is active, that's how we get restoration ×2. Just like before, Ember of Empyrean is going to extend restoration effects through solar weapon and ability kills. 65 HP per second is what restoration ×2 is giving us. Ember of Ashes just guarantees that our Incinerator Snap pretty much triggers an ignition, and we get the melee kill through that to proc Sunbracers, rather than hoping it does enough damage. And then we do still have on Ember of Searing, mainly for the melee energy we get back on Scorched target kills, and grenade energy we get back through creating fire sprites. The only new fragment to this version of the build is going to be Ember of Solace. Radiant and restoration effects applied to us are going to have increased duration at base. This is just so that after we do the Phoenix Dive and we get that ×2 restoration to proc initially, it's going to give us more base duration to get some kills, so we're not feeling super rushed with the build. In this version of the build, mod-wise, I subbed out Momentum Transfer for something like Bolstering Detonation. We're not going to really need melee energy back because we do have Heat Rises, so that's why I made that decision. Likewise, the exact same thing was done, swapping Invigoration here for something like Installation. And then even though I didn't quite mention it on the previous version of the build, we are still rocking Distribution for some class ability energy and energy to all abilities when we use our class ability as well. Lastly, for build number 3, this is more support based, which I will be getting into, which will be useful for other classes that might be strong but lack healing on their own. Verity's Brow gives grenade regen as long as we maintain kills, and throwing our grenade near teammates gives them increased regen too. So our goal is to constantly provide others with healing while also still allowing us to have endless restoration ×2. Plus, with this build, we can also have an endless 25% damage increase for our weapons, so that's great as well. Not like we really lack damage output when using this. Our mid game against champs and majors is probably better than most builds overall. As I already went over a bit, getting into build number 3 here, as you can see, we are running Verity's Brow along with SUNSHOT to constantly provide us with healing grenades, which are going to be much more of a support-based build for our team. For anybody that's not running something like Sunbracers, doesn't have an infinite healing build, we can give them ×2 restoration here and there, or even if they're like a hunter, we can give them ×2 restoration, and they can have Ember of Empyrean to keep chaining it back themselves. For this version of the build, you're obviously going to want healing grenades for yourself and your team. At base, this gives restoration ×1 and cure ×1. Restoration ×1 is 40 HP per second, as I already covered, and then cure ×1 is going to be 60 HP flat for you to get back as soon as this grenade hits you. Touch of Flame is then going to buff our healing grenades. Cure will go up to Cure ×2 for 120 HP the second it touches us, and then Restoration ×2, as I already covered, is 65 HP per second. I almost forgot to cover this, but Celestial Fire is, in my opinion, a better melee since we're just using this in this build to proc Radiant, since it has better tracking and doesn't have a limited range. Once again, Empyrean is going to extend our Radiant and now Restoration effects anytime we get a weapon kill. We're mainly just getting weapon kills with SUNSHOT in this build, so that's what you're going to be relying on. Ember of Singeing then gives us 300% increased base ability regen for 3 seconds anytime we apply Scorch to targets, which we're going to be doing through our melee and then also through SUNSHOT constantly. Ember of Torches allows our melee to now proc radiant effects for ourselves and any nearby teammates, and once again, we're infinitely extending this through SUNSHOT kills. And then just like in version 2 of the build, I still have on Ember of Searing because through this, we're getting both melee energy back, killing scorched targets, and then the fire sprites that we also create through this give grenade energy back on pickup. Here are all the mods for this version of the build, and once again, we are running Verity's Brow with this. Anytime we get a SUNSHOT or any solar weapon final blow, we're going to get a stack of death throws, and that's going to constantly be increasing our base cooldown rate for our grenades. On my helmet, the most notable changes are going to be running 1 heavy ammo finder and 1 heavy ammo scout. As I've covered in a few previous videos, when using exotic primaries to add clear, you get a ton of heavy ammo drops. 1 guaranteed drop, I think, every 15 to 16 kills. So that's why we have this on to gen heavy for ourself and teammates. There's not too many mods that are great for this build since we have healing grenades. So I do have on focusing strike and then impact induction. So anytime we do use our melee ability, we get some energy back for our grenade and I think class ability. On our boots, innervation does give grenade energy chunks back anytime we do pick up those orbs of power that we're creating or our teammates are creating. So in case we need a little bit of energy for our healing grenade so that we can throw it down, that is where we're getting that from. And then likewise, since we do want to always make sure we can proc Radiant and Restoration for our team, we have another copy of Bomber on our class item, and we also have Outreach so that anytime we place our Rift or use our Phoenix Dive when we're with our team, we get a percentage of our abilities straight back to keep the build cycle going. Let me know your thoughts on each of these infinite healing builds in the comments down below. Let me know which one was your favorite, and also let me know if you've used any of these before and which are new to you personally. I stream a bunch of low-mans and speedruns over on my Twitch, so if you guys do want to check that out, a link will be in the description below. I'm live multiple times each week around 9 EST. Anyways, that's all for this video. As always, have a good one, guys. Peace.